and I really enjoy building communities and talking about web development stuff. I'm also co-organizer of CTGS Nigeria, or organizer of CTGS Nigeria. And this is not my first rodeo. I've been doing conference talks for a while. All right, going into my talk, I want to quickly talk about a very short personal story, and this would lead into the idea of the talk. I am based in Amsterdam, where getting an apartment is a hassle, right? For you to find an apartment in Amsterdam, it could take you about three months if you're lucky. And 2 years ago, at the time, I was living in a smaller city and I wanted to move to Amsterdam. So I had a specific apartment in mind that I wanted to live in. This apartment is really nice. And how it works is basically you go to the website. If there is an availability, you pay an initial fee of 100 euros, and it means you've gotten the apartment. So basically what happens then, because of high demand, you only get to see if there's an apartment on Wednesday at 12 o'clock. So for 1 month, I would go to this website every Wednesday at 12 o'clock just to check if the apartment is available. And before that, I'm just thinking, this is, as a developer, this, but at the time, I was too stressed to even think about doing it. But then I have a friend, also a developer, and he asked me, because we're both looking to get the same apartment. He asked me, Gift, this is something you can actually do with code, right? You can actually do this, like, you don't have to always visit the website at a specific time. You can write code to do the entire process. And I wish I did, but he actually went on to, do this, automate the process. Now, when I was making this talk, I thought of a very good example that I could have done that would help my life. And yeah, so basically, browser automation can help you with small tasks like this that would entirely like save you time or help you get exactly what you're looking for. So I didn't do this at the time, but while I was preparing this talk, I went back to the website, of which I no longer live in the apartment. Just so you know, I got the apartment 1 month later, but I no longer live there. So to automate this specific task, what I need to do is use the Workers browser rendering API, which under the hood, it's using Puppeteer. How many of you are familiar with Puppeteer? Okay, a few of you, okay. I'll talk briefly about that and how we're using it within Cloudflare Workers. But basically what I did is I wrote a script to use Puppeteer to navigate to this specific website. And on the website, like I mentioned, if there is an availability, you would know, because on the buttons that you see, one says get notified, it means obviously it's not available. And the ones that says availability 3 means that specific apartment, there's 3 available. So what I did is I wrote code to essentially navigate to the website, check if there is a specific apartment available, and then send me an email, right? This essentially would help reduce the time it took for me to always set an alarm to go check the website every day at a specific time. Another interesting thing you could do to extend this example is, add a cron trigger. So you don't have to always, go and run the specific code. You can maybe run it every Wednesday. Just depends on the current situation. So yeah, this is like a real life example of how you can actually use browser automation in real life, right? But let me quickly talk about Cloudflare Workers, which is the underlying technology that I used in building the demo I just showed you. How many of you are familiar with Workers, Cloudflare Workers? Okay, that's good. So Cloudflare Workers is essentially a service that provides you with an environment where you can run or augment existing code. So think of it as running JavaScript functions on the edge where you're not managing any servers, you're not provisioning any servers. You can just ship code and have your code or application running without thinking of setting up anything. This is an example Cloudflare Workers script. This is written in JavaScript, but you can currently write workers in JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Rust, and a few other languages, right? So what I have here is a script that essentially returns an object to my terminal, where I entered basic data about the conference in the conference data object, and then I'm returning that as a response back to the browser. This is a bare bones example of what you can do within a worker script, but you can do things like returning a response from an API, if you will, intercepting requests, and so much more. Okay, that brings me to the browser rendering API, which is essentially the meat of the stock. So within the Cloudflare developer platform, we have this product called browser rendering API. Essentially what it allows you to do is to programmatically control and interact with headless browser instance, and also create automation flows for your applications. And like I mentioned, this is built using Puppeteer. So we currently have a lot of need for this at the time before this was built within the company, where developers needed to somehow run automation scripts. But the thing with Cloudflare Workers is it uses its own runtime. It doesn't use Node.js runtime, meaning that you might not be able to use Puppeteer directly in Cloudflare Workers. So what we did is make a fork of Puppeteer. So we made a fork of Puppeteer to be able to allow you developers use it directly within your Cloudflare worker. So what we did is, oh, by the way, this came from like a need within the company, where the team that works on Cloudflare Radar, which is a different product entirely, needed to do some automation scripts where they would like to go to a specific website, take a screenshot, and use the screenshot for collecting data. So at Cloudflare, we do something called where we're using a lot of our products internally, even before we ship it out to the public. So this is one of the products that uses Cloudflare Workers browser rendering API within it. And essentially what it does is, if you go to the Cloudflare Radar URL scanner, you can use this to get metrics from a specific application or website or URL. So what happens is you enter a URL under the hood. What happens is the Puppeteer instance navigates to the specific URL, takes a screenshot of the page, and then sends it back to this service where you can take things like the amount of time, like the website ran, and a few other metrics if you would like to collect that as well. So how does this entire thing works? Like I've mentioned, that Workers browser rendering API is something you can use within Cloudflare Workers, and it's a fork of Puppeteer. But how does it work? So the rendering API combines the power of something we have internally called browser isolation and Puppeteer. So a remote browser isolation essentially is something that allows a user to interact with a web browser that is in a remote environment, right? And then what we are doing is we've wrapped the Puppeteer library so that it works directly inside your Workers project. So all you need to do when you're starting up a project that you need to use the rendering API within it is to install the Cloudflare Puppeteer library. And I would show you how to do that in a demo shortly. But another thing that we also added to ensure that you have the Workers browser rendering API working within your Workers script is to add a binding. So essentially what a binding is in the Cloudflare Workers sphere is a way for you to connect to other services. Like, for example, if you want to work with the browser rendering API, you need to add a browser binding within your Wrangler configuration file. If you're working with like KV or D1 or any of the other products, you also need to add a binding. So that's how you connect a Worker script to another service. And here I have another example. So showing you a Worker script that is creating an instance with the Cloudflare Puppeteer library. So what I have here is essentially I'm launching a browser, and then I'm opening up a blank page. I can go further to navigate to a specific URL. I can do things like take a screenshot or create a PDF page, and so much more. Just so that we ensure that we keep all the current features within the actual Puppeteer library compatible with the Workers browser rendering API. We've made our version open source, and we ensure that we make all the features compatible with the actual fork that we've, actual repo that we've forked, right? And right now, as at the time that I'm giving this talk, browser rendering is GA, meaning that you can go and use it right now if you have a need for a project that you need to do automation for. This is something you can try right now within Cloudflare Workers. So we've also shipped recently additional features. So initially, one thing that when it was in closed beta, one thing that people would complain about is the ability to reuse their browser sessions. So for example, if you need to perform a specific task where you need to take a screenshot of a page in several different resolutions, maybe mobile or desktop or whatever other resolutions they are, you might need to run the code over and over, because every time you create a new Puppeteer browser instance, you have to close it, right? So it's not possible for you to perform multiple tasks within that specific instance. So now it's possible using something called browser sessions, which I'll show you an example. We've also added analytics and logs, where within the dashboard, you can go and see how many browsers you've spinned up in the last couple of weeks, because you can see the period there, specific time that it started and the end time as well. And yeah, so those are two additional features that shipped with browser rendering API. With everything I've shared, what are the use cases where you can actually use this? I have shared one where I said I wanted to, check an apartment availability, and what I would do is go and take a screenshot. So there are other things you could do with screenshot. If you need to, for example, compare a specific website over a specific period, you can also use this service for that. Another thing you could do is to generate PDF from a web page. If you have a use case where you need to programmatically create a PDF from a web page, you can also use this for that. Also for testing your web application, for gathering page load performance metrics. And if you would like to crawl a web page for information retrieval, this is also a very good use case for the browser rendering API. So I would like to show you a few examples of some of those use cases that I have mentioned. Let's just hope that the demo gods how we meet today. Okay, the first example I want to show you is how can you actually take a screenshot from a specific URL, and I want to also save that screenshot to Cloudflare R2. So Cloudflare R2 is an object storage where you can save things like images and other assets. All right, so I already have the code written out, and as you can see, what I've done is first I installed the Cloudflare Puppeteer library here, and I have a few other things that I've installed just to ensure the image that I'm generating has like sanitized file names and a good ID. And then I have the interface, the environment variables that because I'm using TypeScript for this, I have to define that as well. But the meat of the application is here, right? On line 19, where the first thing I'm doing is using the puppeteer.launch and passing in the binding that I've created within my Wrangler configuration file. And this is essentially what is going to launch a new browser. And what I've done here is I want to pass in a URL to, like a URL params to this application when I run it. And I want that to actually take a screenshot. So the screenshot taking, I also want to save that to an R2 storage, which is what I am doing here. Yes. Where is it now? Yes, here. So this is where I'm uploading the image that was taken from the screenshots to Cloudflare R2. And Let's try to run this and see if it works. So to run this, I'll use the command wrangler run dev, npm run dev. Okay. So based on what I've set, I can pass in a URL to the endpoint there, and I think it's something like this. So let me use CityJS. I think it's org or com. Okay, yeah. It's going to take a bit, but this will take a screenshot of the CityJS front page, the landing page, and then store that to R2, and then I'm returning the image that was stored. Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. So you can always change this within the code. If you don't want to take an entire screenshot of the whole page, you can, somewhere here, I think, you can pass in a different params that will just take a specific screenshot, maybe just the first page so it's a bit visible. But yeah, this is an example of how you can take a screenshot. The same applies if you want to make a PDF, right? The only thing I'll change here, I'm just going to quickly show you, is here, essentially changing so you can do page.screenshot, page.pdf, and a few other things from the Puppeteer API. So what I'm doing here is I navigated to this specific URL, the Acropolis of Athens, from Wikipedia, and I'm converting that specific Wikipedia page to a PDF, right? For this specific one, I then store it to an R2 bucket as well. Yeah, I think I have an example in my slide, so I don't need to run that because of time. Let me just go back to the slide. So this is the first demo where I've showed you how to take a screenshot, and then the second demo also very similar, but if you notice here, I'm changing the page.screenshot to page.pdf because I want to generate a PDF, and I can also pass in additional parameters like the type of format that I would like the PDF to be returned in. Okay, another demo I want to show you is specific to the use case that I mentioned, where what if you want to run like multiple instances of a specific task without closing the browser? Before now, you could do this using something called durable objects within your Cloudflare worker. Let me show you a quick example of that. Essentially, the current limit of running a browser instance is you can only run 2 concurrent browsers per account, and I think it also stays open for 60 seconds, yeah. So if you want to do a task that would run more than 60 seconds, you could use something like durable objects to extend, to keep your instance alive for maybe another 60 seconds, depending on the specific task that you're trying to run. But this solution needs you to do something extra. It needs you to add durable objects to your application. But we've gotten a lot of feedback and people were not essentially happy with this, which is why we've made it easier using something called the reuse browser session. So within your worker script, you don't need to use durable object, but it's basically doing the same thing where it helps you, keep your browser instance running while you do extra things. So for example, maybe you want to take a screenshot, you want to check the performance metrics for the specific page, you could then do that. So the difference here is, let's see. So the difference here is you have, from the previous example I shared, you have to actually close your browser once you're done with whatever you're doing with your script. But here, you don't need to close your browser. You can disconnect maybe when you're done, but the browser is not essentially closed, so you can still run additional tasks if you want to. And all of this, you don't need to, pull in durable objects for the solution that you're trying to perform. So what I'm doing here is essentially just going to a specific URL and then returning the response that I get back to the browser. If I want to perform another task, I can still do that. And when I'm done, I don't need to close the browser. I can just disconnect. Yeah. Okay. The last demo I would like to show you is if you need to measure web performance, this is also a maybe good example of how you could do that. Of course, I know there are different tools that you can already use, like Google Lighthouse and the other ones that are available. But if you want to do something more detailed, or you want to run your own performance metrics, you can also use the Workers browser rendering API. So essentially what I have here, it's a lot of things, but I'm calculating different things for a specific URL that I navigate to. For example, I'm calculating the JavaScript and CSS coverage. I'm also checking for different metrics like the performance timing within the browser. All of that has different calculations that it entails. I am also calculating the time to first byte here, and then I collect all the metrics and return it. So for every URL that I navigate to, it will calculate all these metrics and return the results for me. This example you see there is from Hacker News. Let's see. Okay. So I have just 3 minutes. All right. I have shared how the browser rendering API allows you to automate different tasks. If you're interested in exploring more, I would recommend you check out the docs where you have a bit more information and examples for the different automation tasks you like to try. I would also recommend you also look into Puppeteer, because if you'd find if you're already familiar with Puppeteer, you don't need to do too much because the API is the same. Or if you need to do some additional things, also going to the Puppeteer documentation to see the different APIs is important as well. All right, we have published a few blog posts about this entire thing, how we built it, how you can actually use it within your application. So if you'd like to read that, I think you can also check out the Cloudflare blog.